I'm Chris Beachum with Gold Derby. We're talking to five of the best cinematographers in the world. And for our Emmys 2020 contenders panel today, John Conroy joins us from Penny Dreadful City of Angels. And John, Showtime has let me know that you are submitting the pilot episode, which a lot of people do and across all kinds of categories, because that pilots have often been worked on for many, many, many months in terms of thought process and actual physical labor. Why did you decide to submit the pilot as your episode?
Well, I suppose in a way because I think it's a great episode anyway in terms of just getting the feel and the sense of the show, but practically as well, there's other great episodes still to air, but they weren't exactly finished, so you couldn't really use those ones. But either way, I think it's probably the fair thing to do really is pick the one that starts it all off and sets it all up really.
Your show is known for big set pieces and big action. So many things happen in this pilot, but all along the way. Tell us about working on a project where you don't shrink, the show does not shrink back at all. You're big, everything is big. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I suppose that comes from John Logan in a way that like the scale for him is very important. And so, I think one thing that we do have a lot of scale, but then I think the idea then is to show that and then get into the detail. And I think that's something that he's always very keen to kind of set up great big wide shots and kind of even develop them into close-ups. But then to kind of, it's not all about the scale once you get into the performance piece. It's about the story. And I think that's just his aesthetic really. And I think we're lucky to be part of it really.
That opening episode, you have that big, massive fire scene. How does your job change when you know you've got something that's going to rely a lot on CGI?
Well, it's interesting that scene we shot out in Piru Lake and up around there, and we grew the field. We had grew the mustard greens in the field, and that was when I went there, because I knew where the sun path was, and knew where they would standing. I asked them to grow them in the opposite way that they would, because normally they would grow them for the waterfall and all that sort of stuff that falls in the area. And the farmers weren't so sure, and I was a bit nervous, but they they worked out okay in the end. And I suppose from that point of view, the biggest thing for us in that field was getting the dimensions of the field right and all of the sort of the gaps in between the rows of the mustard greens. It sounds weird, but when people have to walk in amongst them and they've got a flowing dress on or whatever, all of that stuff, you want it to be elegant rather than ungainly. And for the VFX part of it, we kind of knew, we storyboarded it, so we kind of knew the shots, and I had big Wendy lights, I call them, which are based on David Watkins lights that are using out of Africa on Manitous that are very big, sort of single. They're kind of, I think they're 48 bulbs in each panel, and four of those are rigged to Manitous to recreate fire effects and stuff like that in the close-ups and the medium shots, because it was during fire season, so that was tricky out there to do real fire as well, especially on big scale. And that kind of drove the need for VFX as well out there.
Tell me more about John Logan. We've enjoyed his work for years on various projects. Why do the two of you fit together so well?
I suppose we must have a similar aesthetic. He likes lighting that has shape and has, he doesn't like flat lighting, I suppose, in a way. And I suppose, no, I don't think anybody does, but I don't know. It just seemed to just really kind of connect. And I understand what he's talking about when he's talking about things, because sometimes, even though we get all the scripts and all the scripts are done before we start, there are some things that will change when we start shooting, and everyone might interpret something differently, but John will have an idea in his head. And I think sometimes it's about being able to grasp that idea and understand it straight away without becoming too complicated or too involved. And so I kind of sometimes I think I can kind of read what he likes and what he doesn't like.
Of course, there was a Penny Dreadful before there's a Penny Dreadful City of Angels. What were your discussions as you were starting this one about? Did you want to totally reinvent some things, or did you want to have some of the same styles and palettes and so forth?
What was important, like, and you brought it up earlier in your first point, is that the one thing that he wanted to bring through was the quality and the scale and of the shoot. But this had to be a completely different look. You know, the whole idea of doing anything gothic, any shafts of light, you know, it was all to have a new look, and it had to be sunny, and it had to feel like you might think because it's in LA in '38 that it was noir, but we steered away from noir because it's something that when I shot Broadchurch, it was something that happened as well, that bad things happen in beautiful places. They don't always have to look grimy and gringy and stuff like that for bad things to happen. And I think we wanted to create a world of LA that was sunny, it was hot, and so completely different to Victorian Gothic London.
I wanted to ask about a couple of your cast members. One of my favorites for probably 3 decades now is Nathan Lane. He brings so much to everything he does, whether it's on stage or film or TV. What was it like actually working with him?
I think one of the privileges of my career. He's just fantastic, very generous human being. A bit like what Marshall was saying there, actually, about Bob Odenkirk was, you know, sometimes you might think he was deliver something as you would read it in the script, and you get there and you go, oh my God, I just never would have thought he was going to say that or put that pause in there or do this. And he was just a very generous person. And it, you know, sometimes, you know, they say never meet your heroes, but with him, I was glad to meet him. He's fantastic, and he's a great human being, brilliant actor, very professional, and very powerful as well in this.
And your leading lady, Natalie Dormer, what was it like for you working with her?
Great. I know her as a friend, you know, obviously from when I worked in London and stuff like that. And what she did on this show, the 4 characters she played, is just phenomenal. It's fantastic. And she's an ultimate professional as well, never sort of late on set, always knows, you know, lines. And, you know, I do find that this cast, they were very generous to each other. You know, they were always very professional. You know, there was no messing around. And, you know, everyone had a lot of respect for each other.
Yeah, such a large cast and several well-known people, but several people we kind of discovered on this show.
Yeah, yeah. Like Daniel, I suppose there's Daniel Zavado, who plays Tiago, Nathan's sort of sidekick, and sort of arguably the sort of male lead in this. He's fantastic as well. And I think Adriana Abraza, who played the mother, is just, Maria's fantastic. I mean, they're all great. And I knew Rory, obviously, from Rory Kinnear from the original series. Yeah, and Kerry Bichet and Michael Gladys. It just, they're all fantastic.
I love anything old Hollywood, and you get to play in that kind of a neighborhood here. Were there any secrets to making that realistic?
I suppose, well, Maria Castle, the production designer, I mean, did a fantastic job. And I think, you know, you can't have good cinematography without great production design and costume design. Christy Wittenborn, like, fantastic costume design. And so, you know, with hair, makeup and production design and everybody else, like, you kind of, and also production too, like, you know, Mark Toby and you know, Michael Aguilar, they kind of let us have the tools to do all that stuff. And you need to have all that stuff, or because you can't really, when you're shooting a period piece, you can't just show up in the car park and start shooting. It has to be planned meticulously. And I think one of the things that we did in LA was be very true to the detail. And especially like when we shot in downtown, we shot outside City Hall, like, to shoot there. And there's a scene that's, I think it was in episode 9 that I shot, where our German character Goss was standing in front of City Hall where the old LA Times building was, and that was in the background. And I'm convinced everybody will think it's green screen, that they'll never believe that it was real, you know, that we shot it there for real. It just looks so perfect. And there's a lot of that great architecture in LA. And so I think it's like, for example, the first day of shooting down in the LA River, like for me, I was blown away by that day. I actually didn't go to lunch. I just sat there and soaked it all in, like coming from Kildare in Ireland and finding myself in the LA River, where, you know, it was kind of surreal. But if you say that old Hollywood, there's a lot of old Hollywood there. You just have to unpick it and find it again.